So we have Megan and Robert.
Yes, sir.
Please.
Please state your full name
Laura Megan Ryan.
and repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely
I do solemnly, sincerely,
and truly declare and affirm
and truly declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but
and
the
nothing
truth.
but the truth.
Please state your full name
Robert Derrick Ryan.
and repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely
I do solemnly, sincerely,
and truly declare and affirm
and truly declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Megan, I'm going to start with some questions for you and then some questions for your son, Robert.
Okay.
So in around October 1979, you moved to Germany.
I did, yes.
You're going to have to forgive my German pronunciation of the place names. You moved to a place called Soest?
Soest.
Soest. And you met Chris, who was in the army.
Yes.
And you got married.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1981, you found out that you were pregnant.
Yes.
But you started losing weight in the pregnancy, and it was discovered you had anemia.
Yes.
And so you went to one of the British military hospitals in June of that year,
Yes.
and you were given plasma.
Yeah.
But your haemoglobin levels remained low, and
Yes.
you were readmitted to the same British military hospital for a blood transfusion.
Yes.
And what can you remember about that?
I remember it being on the 29th of July 1981 because it was the day Diane and Charles got married, and I was in a bed on my own while everybody was celebrating, tripped up at the other end of the hospital. I was given 4 pints of blood.
So you had 4 pints of blood. Now, you were in a British military hospital,
Yes.
but in Germany, and you don't know what the source of that blood was, whether
No.
it's brought to the British hospital from the United Kingdom or sourced locally in Germany.
No idea.
Now, that transfusion was effective for a while in maintaining your haemoglobin levels, but they reduced down again.
Yes.
And so you were readmitted in September for another couple of weeks to the same British military hospital, and you received another 4 pints of blood.
Yes.
You gave birth to Robert in November 1981.
Yeah.
Again in a British military hospital, this one Rinteln.
Rinteln, yes. We'd moved by then.
And you had a further blood transfusion a couple of days after Robert's birth.
Yes.
Now, you were discharged back to where you were living, and how did you start to feel in the days after that?
Extremely tired. I just put that down to being a new mum. Then I started itching my feet and my legs. I didn't really put any thought to it. I was just really, really tired. And then one of the Safa sisters came to visit me, and she said, she looked at me and she said, "You're yellow," and she said, "Your eyes are brown," which I'd noticed they were. I said, "Well, I've got a new baby. I'm not sleeping." And she looked and she said, "You're yellow." And 2 hours later, I was back in the hospital.
And so they did tests at you back at the hospital, and what did they tell you?
I'd got hepatitis B.
So hepatitis B, and they intimated you'd probably been infected through the blood transfusions
Yes.
that you'd received, probably the July 1981.
Yeah, they said that it was a 6-month incubation period, so probably that one.
What treatment did you receive in the hospital?
Multivitamins. That was it.
And you've said in your statement the doctors told you there was nothing else they could do, and they seemed to think the infection would cure itself.
Yes, yeah.
Robert was a very young baby, was in the hospital with you, and you've got a recollection of some doctors standing around the bed. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, Robert was about 2 weeks old, and I was laid in bed and he was in my arms. And 3 doctors stood at the end of my bed, discussing me, not talking to me, just discussing me. But remember one saying very clearly, "What about the baby? Shall we take the baby off her?" Well, naturally, as a new mum, I thought, nobody's having my baby. And the second one said, "Do we need to test him?" And the third one, who was older, and a very clear picture of him, down to the colour of his hair and everything, said, "No, she's breastfeeding, he'll be fine."
Now, you were discharged from the hospital
Yes, yeah.
not long after that, and your symptoms did indeed disappear.
Yes.
You were no longer yellow, you were no longer itchy.
Yeah.
You don't recall being given any information at the hospital about any risks of transmission?
No, nothing at all, no.
And about 12 months later, you went back to the British Military Hospital, you were tested, and you were told you'd cleared the infection.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then you thought no more of it for many years?
Yes. Can I just add there?
Of course you can.
Because I've forgotten, I've spoken to him this morning. Need to mention that he was tested at the time and he was clear because they wanted to make sure it hadn't come from him, and he was clear. There was no sign of infection with him.
So you returned to the UK at the end of 1985.
Yes.
Robert was about 4. You and your husband separated at that
Yes,
point.
yeah.
But it was a number of years later, in about 2000, you saw a new GP at your GP practice. Can you tell us what happened?
Yes, I went in to see the GP about something, I forget what, and he looked through my notes and he said, "Oh, I see you've had hepatitis B, what's the status there?" And I just said, "Well, as far as aware, I'm clear of that." And he said, "What about your son?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know." And whilst I was in the room, he phoned up the infectious diseases people, and the man on the phone spoke to me, and then he put back onto the GP, and he said he recommended that I'd get my son, told my son to get tested.
And other than that conversation of the 3 doctors at the end of the bed in the British Military Hospital when you were there back in 1981, Robert was now 18 years old, and this was the first time anyone had suggested to you that Robert might need to be tested.
Yes, yes.
And so you called Robert
Yeah.
and passed on the
Well,
message.
my ex-husband, and because Robert was living with Chris then, and I phoned him and he passed it on to Robert here.
So, Robert, turning to you, at that point in time, you weren't unaware of any health issues.
Yeah, completely.
You'd grown up healthy and strong as far as you were concerned.
Yeah.
But you received this message. What do you recall about that?
Basically just got told to go see my GP and get tested for hepatitis B, which I did, and that turned out to be positive. It was a chronic infection.
You were told by your GP, chronically infected with hepatitis B.
Yeah.
And you were referred to a specialist or a consultant at Middlesbrough General Hospital.
Yeah.
And what did he tell you was the likely cause of your infection?
Passed on from my mother through the blood transfusion that she had.
And he suggested to you that it was likely you'd been infected since birth.
Yeah.
And there were no other reasons why he could see you would have contracted hepatitis B. Can you recall what information or advice you were given about the hepatitis B at the time?
Very little. I was informed about the risk of bleeding and people contracting it, and the sexual issue of passing it on. I was made aware current partners would have to be tested or immunised, and children like they're the same.
And you've said in your statement that the doctors bombarded you with technical terms that you didn't really understand.
Yeah, all these numbers and 3-letter acronyms that I didn't have a clue.
And you were told about how others could contract the virus, but you weren't given any advice about the psychological or emotional impact of the infection. And you think you should have been given more information, if not counselling, to help you process the diagnosis. Now, you had a liver biopsy soon after that.
3 in total.
What can you tell us about those?
They hurt. It's basically a great big needle to numb the area. Ram it, it's about that long, straight in your side, rip a bit of your liver out and then do some tests on it.
And you were advised to take treatment
Yes. So,
interferon alpha
yes.
for 3 months to try and reduce the viral load.
Actually 6, as I spoke to my father today. 6 months.
What can you recall about that treatment? What did it entail?
Self-administration, kind of an EpiPen style, straight into your stomach. Side effects of that are absolutely awful. Wouldn't wish it on anyone, to be brutally honest. It's like having the flu constantly, every other day, for 6 months.
And you said you'd be red hot but feel freezing cold.
Yeah.
The day after an injection, you could hardly function and you'd end up sleeping for most of the day.
It was recommended to take it at night to try and sleep through the effects of it. That didn't work. Kept me awake all night. Had to keep having red hot baths in the middle of the night because I was so cold.
Now, you've been told that there was about a 50-50 chance of the treatment succeeding and clearing
Yeah.
the virus. Did it succeed?
No.
And what other treatments were available to you?
None. None at all.
What, if any, advice were you given about prognosis?
I kind of, when I was first diagnosed, I kind of went off the rails a bit. Started drinking very heavily for quite a number of years. As it turns out, I didn't think it was years, but it turns out people have told me otherwise.
You, as I understand it, Robert, you feel it was a few months, but your mum says it was years.
Yes. And I went back to see my consultant, and he said to me, if you carry on, you'll be dead at 40.
And did you at that point heed the advice in relation to alcohol?
It dropped considerably, but it didn't stop altogether.
How did you feel about the diagnosis and telling people about it?
I'm kind of quite stubborn, kept things to myself, didn't really let it go. I obviously had to inform people who I needed to inform, work and family and partners. But apart from that, I didn't really tell anyone.
Around the time that you found out your diagnosis, you've been applying to the Royal Air Force.
Yes.
What happened with that application?
Declined because they found out I had hepatitis.
You actually got through, I think, to quite a late stage of
Yes.
the process, the recruitment process. And that was the reason that was given
Yeah.
to you. It was
Actually,
the hepatitis B.
aced the pilot's test. And got to the medical, and that's when they refused me.
I went with him to the for him to get the results. He'd come top of the class and everything, and I waited outside, wandered around town while he got results. He'd come out. He was devastated, absolutely devastated.
You've put it in what I understand from you and your mum is probably typically understated terms. You said it was a huge disappointment to you and has
Yeah.
probably been one of the most significant consequences
Yeah.
of the infection.
Because all my family have been in the forces, and it's what I wanted to do. Father and grandfather, army, uncles, navy. I wanted to go in the RAF.
Have you, since that time and since the initial treatment failed, have you been having regular follow-ups, regular appointments?
I have been seeing them, but not regularly, down to my own fault. Getting married, having children, moving house a few times, lost contact with me original consultant and started seeing a new one, but father-in-law died and then moved house again. So life got in the way.
2015, you saw a new consultant who told you that your medical records relating to when you'd seen the first consultant had been lost.
Yes.
That consultant suggested a new treatment, but you read up on the side effects, and what did you decide?
Not to take it because one of the side effects was damage to the liver, and hepatitis B is damage to the liver, so I didn't see the point in hurting myself anymore, to be honest.
You said at the time of your statement that your most recent blood test was a couple of years ago and it showed fluctuating viral load. Is that still, as far as you're aware, the position?
That's still the last and current one that I have.
You've not, as I understand it from your statement, Robert, experienced particular physical symptoms from the hepatitis.
No.
the treatment caused you the side effects you've described.
Yeah,
But for you, it's the potential knowledge of long-term damage to your liver and shortened life expectancy that has weighed on your mind.
yeah. I'm quite a stubborn person. I keep things to myself and don't show things very often, but as it's been made clear to me, it's affected me in ways that I haven't realised. Hence why my mother's had to give up her life and career down in Stoke and move up here to stay with me, because she thought a few years ago that I was close to death.
Megan, what's your take on how it's impacted, first of all, on Robert?
I think from how he was from a teenager to how after the diagnosis, how deep he's gone in himself. He's very quiet and doesn't speak. His wife, along the years, has spoke to me and has been worried because he doesn't even speak to his wife about it. So I've seen that change in him, though he doesn't realise it, but I have. And he says it doesn't affect his health, probably because he doesn't know any different. But 5 years ago, when I come up to visit at Christmas, he was grey. His colour was grey. And his wife took me to one side and said, "I'm really, really worried about him, Megan." And I said, "I can see that." And took him out for a drink and had a chat with him. Said, sort of give him a bit of a mother's nag, you need to do something about this. You've got children there and everything. And made the decision to sell up, leave a good job, and to come and live closer to him, because I thought, as he's just said, I thought he was dying. He looked that bad. He has, this last couple of years, pinked up a bit and put some weight on. No, people might not think he's thin, but you should have seen him before. And, hopefully there's maybe a bit of a corner. I spoke to Robert's consultant when he was going through the tests. I used to come up and sit with him, and while he had to lie flat in a bed for 24 hours, didn't you?
Yeah.
About that. And asked his consultant what the diagnosis was, what the prognosis was. And he said he couldn't say much because of patient confidentiality, but he did say if he didn't drink, he'd got 30 to 40 years, but if he did drink, he'd got 20 to 30 years. So you can imagine how I felt watching him drink for 12 years, knowing that he's shortening his life.
But even
Awful.
even the prognosis with not drinking was still
yeah.
significantly shortened
Yeah.
life expectancy.
So you would have been talking 50 to 60. Yeah.
And it's the understanding of both of you that the hepatitis B may have caused or be causing ongoing damage to Robert's liver. Mm-hmm. And you've said in your statement, Robert, you've been told that there might come a point where you will need a liver transplant.
Yeah, I've been told that, yeah.
Robert, you've never received any financial assistance from any trust or scheme.
No.
You read an article once and did a bit of research on the Skipton Fund, but found out that it wasn't concerned with hepatitis B.
No, it's only hepatitis B that they apply.
C and
that they
HIV.
apply to.
And you did phone an NHS helpline and you asked if there was any financial support available for those infected with hepatitis B through blood, and what was the response?
No.
Megan, what's the impact been on you and your life? You cleared the virus, but then 18 years later discovered that your son had been infected.
It was very hard when I first heard about it, because knowing that your child will die before you is not good. It's not what any parent wants to hear. Very lucky he's still with us, and hopefully he is for a long time to come. Sorry.
That's all right. You said you blamed yourself for a long time.
Yes, I did, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you took a number of life decisions, you've touched on them, in order to live closer to Robert and to his children, so that you could be there maybe continue to remind him of...
Well, yes, to help
The
and help
doctor's
out
advice?
because the children were a lot younger, obviously, and they still are young, you know, they're still in primary school. To be there for him, yes, I'd give up a good job. I was manageress of a shop, owned my own house, saving for my retirement. I gave all that up to move to a place I didn't know, and now live on university credit, can't get a job because of my age and health reasons, my own health reasons, not connected to this, and I'm absolutely a pauper and have to go to food banks to live. I've got nothing. So I've done all that because of this illness, to be closer to my family, to help out. And I thought, like I said, I thought this was the beginning of the end
And
5 years ago.
exactly what you've said in your statement. You were worried about 15 years after Robert's diagnosis, you were worried he was nearing that 20-year lifespan that the consultant had mentioned. And you thought if it was going to be the beginning of the end for him, you wanted to be there. If it was going to be drawn out, you wanted to be there and to be able to help out.
Yeah, of course.
And you've said in your statement that the most difficult thing for you is Robert's mum has been watching Robert go through all this.
Yes, absolutely. And not really being able to do anything to take it away from him.
Those are the questions that I had for you. Is there anything that either of you would like to add?
I would just like to say that we feel, I think I speak for both of us, that we both feel very aggrieved that hepatitis B isn't recognised, where hepatitis C is. So thankful that, you know, that we've been brought to this inquiry. We knew nothing about it, nothing till just before Christmas. We've had no support. And I just feel that financially we should be added to the Skipton Fund to be recognised. Not to be just... I phoned the Skipton Fund up. It was one of the shortest phone conversations I've ever had. Basically, no, and that was it. So rude. We want to be recognised.
And Robert's explained how he was not offered any the kind of counselling or support that might have helped him when initially diagnosed. Have you ever been offered any counselling or support?
Nothing. In fact, I was treated appallingly when I was in hospital. Absolutely appallingly. Shoved to the end of it, a long corridor in a room on my own, and my food was pushed round the floor, round the door on the floor. People wouldn't come in. It was awful.
Was that at the British Military Hospital when you had the hepatitis?
Yes, when I went back in with Robert. There was one decent nurse out of the lot, male nurse.
And have you experienced that again in the NHS when you told people that you had hepatitis B in the past?
Yes, I had to have a mole taken from under my foot once. And it was about 10 to 12 years after. And we were down for the first surgery in the afternoon, and at 5 o'clock, me and my dad come with me, we were still sat there, and I said, when are we going to be seen? And they said, we're leaving you to last because we'll have to scrub down everything after we've done you. I've now stopped telling people I had it, because it's just on the tick boxes. I just don't tell anybody anymore, because I've had it in the dentists and everything, and I just don't say anymore that I've had it. So.
Robert, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think my mum's covered it all there, to be fair.
I'm just going to ask Mr Williams, who represents you, Robert, if there's anything else. No, nothing.
And I have nothing of my own to ask, but can I thank you both for coming and being victims of HBV infection, as so many are that we have heard from are not. So thank you very much for your evidence.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Now that concludes our first week in Leeds.
It does, sir.
We will start again at 10:30 on Tuesday. What do we have in store on Tuesday?
We have 3 witnesses on Tuesday, sir. We have Nicola Leahy, we have an anonymous witness, and we have Suresh Vagela.
Thank you. 10:30 on Tuesday.